Good morning, everyone. All right, super excited to be here with all of you today. My name is Douglas Stark. I'm actually not related to the people that you said earlier, but I'm here on Cyprus in Limassol for the first time. Came all the way from Sweden up north in Europe. I even brought my mom. My mom is on the first row here, and we're both super excited to be here with you today. Great, there we are. So today I will speak about one of my favorite topics, that is the 15-minute city. Most of you probably wonder what that is. I had that conversation with a man in Stockholm actually last week. I told him, you know, I'm going to Cyprus next week and I'm going to talk about 15-minute cities. And he looked at me interested and asked, that must be very small cities. And I said that they're not actually. They're based on the concept of Paris itself. And he looked even more interested and said, okay, Douglas, so you must be an architect then. I told him I'm not. I'm actually a co-founder of the leading European micromobility operator, VOI Technology. And I'm here today to tell the full story for all of you here about 15-minute cities that I didn't share with the man last week, and super excited to get into it. But before we jump into why 15-minute cities are so important to me, I want to be clear and define, first of all, why cities are important, and then dive into why they should be designed as 15-minute cities. Did you know that more than 50% of all the people on Earth live in cities? More than 50%. And this number is increasing. In 30 years, more than 60%, even 68% of all the people on Earth will live in cities. And in just 10 years, in 2030, there will be 43 mega cities on Earth. And a mega city is a city with more than 10 million inhabitants. So today there's roughly 33 on Earth. So over the next 10 years, we will add another 10 mega cities. And this means that existing cities are growing bigger and bigger and getting more and more important for us in our lives here on Earth. And this is actually good for us. Cities are getting bigger, more important for us, because cities are a very efficient way of living together, simply because we share all the resources between more people when we live in a dense area of people. And the cities on Earth that I mentioned, 50% of all the people live in them today, they only inhabit 3% of all the space on Earth. 3% for more than 50% of all the people. It's quite fascinating. And a study that's been done in New York in the US shows that an average New Yorker consumes 74% less water than an average American. And the same study shows that an average New Yorker consumes 35% less electricity than an average American. And 45% less garbage than an average American. Some people go so far as to say that cities are the only way that we will be able to scale our population on Earth. And the forecast is that we will add another 3 billion people in the next 80 years on Earth. And cities are the only way then to do this in an efficient way. So, that's why I think cities are important. Now, let's dive into why 15-minute cities are important. I think everyone here knows that city life is not perfect. I imagine even those living in this beautiful city of Limassol can acknowledge a few downsides of the intense city life. And it's very well illustrated on this picture that's painted by a Swedish artist called Carl Gilg, and shows how much space in a normal city that is reserved for cars or all things that are not people walking around in the city. And it's a good conversation starter to acknowledge that should this be the way that we design cities in the future? Should this be the way that we want to live in the cities in 100 years? And I had a conversation with a man yesterday that acknowledged that the future of Limassol is great, but I think everyone who's been here during summer understands that it's very warm. And an easy way of taking down temperature in the city is to plant more trees. So bring the parks into the city, bring more nature into the city. And this is important not only in Limassol and on Cyprus, but for the rest of the globe as well, as the temperature, everyone knows, is increasing year over year. And there are very easy mechanisms to work with this by just welcoming nature into this design of the cities and welcoming parks in more areas throughout the city. So by bringing parks into the city, you can actually decrease the average temperature in the city with up to 10 degrees. I think that's quite fascinating. So what I want to say is that cities are getting increasingly important. Cities are not optimally designed for the quality of life that we have in mind, but that doesn't mean that we should be happy. There is a way to scale quality of life in cities and allow people to live in cities and welcome nature into it. And that concept is called the 15-minute city. And now you ask, Douglas, what is a 15-minute city? Is it a very small city, as the man in Stockholm last week asked me? And no, it's not. The 15-minute city was a concept that was founded just 2 years ago, in 2019, in Paris, the city of Paris, by a French philosophist and scientist called Carlos Moreno. So Carlos Moreno is the founder of the 15-minute concept, and a very wise man. He identified 4 cornerstones of the 15-minute city. The first one is proximity. And proximity means that everything should be within a short distance. You should have access to it in a short geographical distance. Diversity means that there should be a wide assortment and variation among the things that are available in a short distance. And density highlights that this should be in a confined area, not in a big space, but rather in a smaller defined area. And ubiquity means that it should be available for everyone. So like water should be available for everyone, so should quality of life within a city. Carlos Moreno also identified 6 essential urban social functions that are very important for the 15-minute city concept. And these are living and working, supplying and caring, learning and enjoying. And what does this mean? Living and working, it means you need a house. Of course, it's a city, you live in a city, right? But you also need friends within reach, you need people, and you need work to afford that house. Supplying and caring, you need food, clothes, you need hospital and medicine, all within a 15-minute reach. Learning and enjoying, you need schools, theaters, and as I said, parks and trees. And Carlos Moreno was clear that he believed this should be in a 15-minute reach, either by walking or biking. And Carlos Moreno was a big fan of shared transportation and seeing the opportunities for new modalities in this space. Whilst he didn't mention explicitly public transport, he said that he's not a fan of cars and how much space the cars takes up in the city. But we see the opportunity here for lighter, smaller electric vehicles to be part of Carlos Moreno's vision and combine that both with public transport, walking, to enable the city to be available for everyone. All right, so that was the first presentation mode part of my keynote here. Now I want everyone to, wake up from the morning rush, and we're going to go on a journey together. A journey through your imagination and a journey through Europe. The first stop of this journey is in my hometown, where I'm born and raised in Stockholm, Sweden, far up north in Europe. What you see behind me here is Hornsgatan. Hornsgatan in Stockholm is one of the most busiest streets on the part of Stockholm called Södermalm, which is a very vivid neighborhood where people live and they work and they have restaurants and cafes, and everything's accessible there. And this street goes right through Södermalm, and thousands of cars pass by on a daily basis. It's so many cars that are passing by here that the city has prohibited the cars from driving with studded tires, because the studded tires, they release so much pollution into the air. So this is Hornsgatan today in Stockholm, Sweden. Now I would like everyone here to close your eyes. Close your eyes. Everyone in the back over there too. And in the front, to the left. Close your eyes and now open them. So welcome to what Hornsgatan could look like if we fully embrace the 15-minute vision and the 15-minute concept. So this is a design that my company VOI Technology has produced with an architecture firm on how we could enable Stockholm to become more of a 15-minute city. And what you see here are elements of removing or substituting space for cars today, and then welcoming some of nature into that space, welcoming public transport to be part of it, but allowing the space to be accessible by smaller, lighter vehicles, and then allow the rest of the space to be for people moving around. And this is what the 15-minute city is about. Next stop, Copenhagen, 700 kilometers southwest of Stockholm in Denmark, on an island called Sjælland. So Denmark is like 4 different small islands in the Nordic. And this looks like a regular living quarter with a lot of parking lots, cars. I'm sure they're super happy that you can park outside of the door the few times you find the parking spot, that is. And yeah, nothing more than that. But my question is, should this be it? What if instead we plant a few trees, remove the cars, and we build some social areas for entertainment for all ages? We welcome out the children to play. We allow families of all ages to meet and interact and just look at the beautiful trees and flowers. Third stop is on another island, the island of the United Kingdom, here in the city of Liverpool. And the buildings are a bit smaller here, and I haven't been specifically on this street. I've been in Liverpool, but this street, to me, what stands out is how explicit we are with the red safety beacons. And, you know, what's the function of those? The function is to protect you from the cars that are driving right through this neighborhood. And otherwise, restaurants, a few people have access to that area. What about we say the cars should not pass by here? They can stop on the side next to the street. They can unload over there if the cafes and restaurants, of course, they need goods. But we instead, we give this area back to people. We plant a few trees. We allow people of all ages to come out and meet and greet and interact. And I've actually seen this transformation back in my hometown in Stockholm, in an area close to where I live on Odenplan, where there used to be a car road, and then the city decided that, no, we'll turn it into a town square instead. And just by then blocking the cars from going there, planting 1 or 2 trees, putting a few bike racks there and a bench, all of a sudden what used to be shoe repairs and like watch repair shops transformed into cafes and restaurants, which then attracted more people and turned that space into a really social area where people come to meet and have lunch. And it's actually one of my favorite spots in Stockholm to have lunch now, with a great cafe. So it's incredible to see when the city decides to take action, it really impacts everyone in that area. Fourth stop on this journey is in the country of France, in the beautiful city of Marseille, just by the water on the south coast. And I think this picture represents just an ordinary street in Europe, and probably compared to a lot of parts in the world, this is a very good street. But again, should we be pleased? Should this be it? Can't we do more? What if we say public transport is allowed instead of cars? What if we say there should be a bike path, a designated bike path? Just like I've heard in Limassol now, every time you build a new street, you need to include a bike path on that street. And of course, there's going to be room for smaller vehicles to allow for people to efficiently transport themselves around. The last stop of the journey, of course, is in the huge city of Paris in France. And what you see here is a visualization of the future of Champs-Élysées, which is the biggest circulation in Paris. And before COVID, it was something like 3,000 cars passing by here on a daily basis. And it's a 8-lane highway in the middle of the city. And 100,000 of people walking by on a daily basis. So the pollutions here were greater than the ring road that was going around Paris even. But what's really great with Paris is the commitment that they've made to realizing the vision of a 15-minute city. And the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, has committed 250 million euro to this particular roundabout, the Champs-Élysées, and removing 50% of the cars from the roundabout, and instead creating green tunnels for nature and people to access this roundabout and do it for people instead. So the 15-minute city is not just a theoretical concept, it's a concept that is in action, and a concept that all cities can embrace and implement. And when I'm not here with you dreaming about 15-minute cities, I'm back home in Stockholm, Sweden, with VOI, my company, and we actually have this vision of cities made for living at VOI. And we work on a daily basis to, in every city we're in, take another step towards the 15-minute city vision. And this is a quite complex exercise that involves a lot of interesting technology. We're talking about technology in this Reflect Festival. But just to be able to solve the accuracy, location challenges, we need some cutting-edge computing solutions. We have very complicated computer vision for integrating with cities on the safety topic. And we're working hard on combining just new technology with city relationships to fulfill the 15-minute city vision. And to be clear then, what's the connection between VOI and the 15-minute cities? So VOI now is a company that is operating across 70 cities in Europe, in 11 countries. We started out just 3 years ago, and we're growing every day. For me, a personal anecdote how VOI enables the 15-minute city for me is that a few weeks ago, me and my wife, we started having weekly lunch together. So every Tuesday we meet at a spot in the city and we have lunch. We both work in Stockholm, but without the power of VOI or the power of a 15-minute city, we wouldn't have had the time to both meet, eat, and then get back to work in just an hour that you usually reserve for lunch, right? But now we do. And that's back to what's not quality of life. It's not having lunch with the love of your life on a weekly basis. So again, this is not only me. Over 1 million people ride with VOI on a weekly basis. And we are in over 70 cities in Europe. We're the largest player in Europe on both the number of rides and the number of city licenses that we are operating in Europe. And I'm very happy that all of you managed to get here today, listen to me. I'm very happy that I got invited by the Reflect Festival. And I'm very happy to be here on Cyprus, on this beautiful island. And with that, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Douglas Stark, thank you very much. And before you go any further, I'm going to invite someone on stage. And we're going to have a small chat and a few questions, if you don't mind. Yes? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Paul Josephak.
Hey, Paul.
So I think we're getting some chairs.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Test, test. Okay. So hello, everyone. I want to use the 15 minutes that we have. I'll try and keep it in the time slot. Ask some more questions about you.
Great.
You talked about the company. You talked about the 15-minute city.
Yeah.
What was your founder journey? You guys started 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Give us some background on how you became a founder and why.
Sure. Yeah, we, I think 4 years ago, when I was the CEO of an accelerator in Stockholm, supporting different startups, at the time I bought a private e-scooter, and I was a big fan. From the first second of a ride, I took it everywhere. I took it, on the street. I took it in the hallway in the office. I took it on the bus. We took it to the supermarket with my then girlfriend, now wife. And one day in the accelerator, my colleague who was running another startup used it to go on an errand out on town. And he realized that, okay, it's not only Douglas that loves this vehicle, it's actually possible that more people would love it. So back then we saw that an American player called Bird was taking off in the US, and both of us, Fredrik is now my co-founder and CEO on VOI, we said that, okay, should we really let the Americans do this in Europe? And we said, no, we want this to be a European champion. We want there to be a European champion within micromobility, and we quickly got to work. And gathered a founding team, gathered some investors, rallied interest, and then got started in June 2018. And at the time, people told us it would take 6, 9, 12 months to get the actual hardware to work out on the street. But we refused to believe so, because then we would never been quick enough. And by some smart, young tech talent, we managed to do it in 2.5 months. And on the 25th of August in 2018, we launched in Stockholm. And we're now in more than 70 cities in Europe.
For a 3-year-old company, if I read all the press releases properly, you've raised quite a bit of money. I'm also presuming for a hardware play, you need to have the money to build the scooters. What's the vision? Where does it go past scooters? I mean, some of your competitors, I think, are doing bikes and other things. Where do you guys go with VOI?
Yeah. No, and from the start, we took the name VOI Technology, both to indicate that VOI comes from voyage, which means a journey, and technology to indicate that we're building technology to make journeys possible. So we started out with e-scooters, But that doesn't, it doesn't stop there. We see us as then the enabler of 15-minute cities, the enablers of cities made for living. And e-scooters is the first model. We already have e-bikes in the United Kingdom, and we're definitely over time going to add more vehicles. But not only shared vehicles, we believe in the private vehicles as well. We have had pilots of reselling e-scooters to private consumers that has worked very well. So we see huge opportunities within the space in different verticals for VOI.
What about the effects of COVID? When you listen to the conversation now about remote work, there even is a discussion about people leaving cities. You're talking about pulling people back into cities. I think I just saw a question from Slido where you're advocating to move everyone into the big cities. Won't there be a push now on the back of COVID for people to actually leave cities? What are your thoughts on that for your business?
I want to be clear, I'm not advocating for pulling people into cities. I'm just saying that there's a trend that more and more people will live in cities. And I definitely think that COVID has been a trend break in it. I don't think it's been a full stop on urbanization of cities. At least anecdotally, I know from my hometown, the prices of houses have increased during COVID, but the prices of larger apartments in the city have increased more. So the demand for cities is still huge. But I do think the remote work topic is super interesting. But a question back is, or reflection is, does it, force people out of the city, or does it allow people to relocate between different cities, right? So maybe then new cities will pop up as interesting on the maps, and then we will be needed there as well. But even if you do choose to live in a rural area, I think our future then private solutions for you will be definitely fine. So it's not like we say everyone needs to live in a city. It's not about that.
What happens ultimately in this space? So I live in Hamburg, Germany. When I walk around the inner part of the city, I think I see 5 or 6 different providers of scooters at this point, VOI being one of them, but all the other names we all know. Yeah. What happens in that market? I mean, is there just a huge consolidation coming down the pipes in that space, or does one ultimately win and everyone else disappears? What's your kind of vision there? Yeah,
we don't think it's like one takes all game, but rather it will be less than today, and that's been a continuous development since the start. So I think our first year, it was like 100 operators in Europe, and now it's like only 50. But 50 is still too much. So we think in, say in 10 years, there will be 3 or 4 global operators that will be competing about Tokyo, Los Angeles, Sao Paulo, London, New York, Paris, and be considered as, the future public transport company that will enable quality of life cities.
Are you guys getting criticism at the same time from, let's say, climate activists who are saying we're putting all these scooters on the streets, they're full of batteries and lithium and whatnot? Is that something that you guys are struggling with, or is there a good answer for that?
Sure. No, we're definitely getting criticism for that with right, but also we did our first life cycle analysis of our full company when we were 1 year old, right? So how many of the existing public companies can say that? I think for being so young, we've come a far way, and we have several internal initiatives to continuously make sure that vehicles that we build are then representing more recyclable material or even recycled material, and that the batteries do last longer, so that we don't pollute the planet in the farther extent as possible.
Back to the company, because we keep talking about the fact that it's so young. What's been the biggest struggle? I mean, you've grown the company so fast. What are some lessons learned?
I mean, lesson learned is that great people is everything. If you bring on, when you grow fast, you're often forced to just bring a lot of people on. But having the ice in the stomach to say maybe we don't need as much people if we just have great people, I think that's a good lesson. So make sure that you find people that really believe in what you do and that are set up to do good work. That's some lesson learned, yeah.
Are the majority of your people in Sweden, or have you guys already started internationalizing?
Yeah, no, our biggest office is in Stockholm. Our second biggest office is London. And then third is the city of Gothenburg in Sweden, which is a hardware hub for automation. So we're definitely international. We have offices in Berlin, Milano, Rome, Barcelona, yeah, basically every capital city in Europe.
Growing so quickly, how do you keep the culture kind of aligned? I mean, you're going to have people all over the place. How do you keep everyone kind of going in the same direction?
A reflection from people coming from larger companies to VOI is that they're really amazed with the fact that we have weekly all hands. So every Monday at 3 o'clock, everyone gathers and dials in from all over Europe to align on how did last week go, what's the most important topics within the company right now. And then it's always me and my co-founder and CEO, Fredrik, on the stage. And just making sure that we always stay connected to everyone in the business is super important.
Are you getting support from the outside? I mean, you guys, you're still fairly young in terms of your founder journey. How are you guys quasi growing as a management team? And how do you make sure you kind of double checking what you do? Do you have mentors, coaches? How do you guys help yourselves?
Yeah, luckily we've been relying on venture capital from the start, and then we've been lucky to have really experienced investors on the board that have acted as mentors and coaches for us from the start. And then we have been lucky to be able to recruit senior people as well into the management teams that are coaching from the inside, and constantly, you know, exposing yourself to new people, new opinions, new thoughts, and just being interested. I think the most important piece is if you're interested in growing, interested in growth, then you will grow, otherwise you will not.
And now in the last, let's say, 3 years, with the amount of money you've raised, the amount of funds that you've had kind of approach you or that you've had to pitch to get the fundraisers to close, what would you say to someone else who's going on the same path, who's going out to raise venture capital? What are some insights you might give?
I mean, take care of yourself. It's a really challenging journey. I think you need to be a strong salesperson in terms of realizing that it only takes one yes, but you will probably get 99 no's on the way, right? And then you just need to be mentally prepared to take those 99 no's before the one yes shows up. And I think that's a big, I mean, I think people talk about mental health in the startup community, the tech world and so forth, but that part is really a big strain on everyone who's fundraising, and then making sure that you have this social net at home or with your friends to hold you up and support you during that phase is critical.
I've always been of the opinion that you can be born an entrepreneur. It's hard to make someone an entrepreneur. Were you doing things before, kind of that were entrepreneurial as you were growing up? Did you start multiple businesses already? I mean, you said you were an incubator before this.
Yeah.
What was kind of, when you were younger, in your teens or whatever, what were you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, it's like always talking about this story when you were young or stuff, but my mom sits here, and we used to have a small house when I was younger with a small garden in a pretty populated area. And then I was like growing plants in the garden, and then were standing and selling them on the street just outside the door. And people actually bought those plants, and it was, you know, I didn't pay for those plants. It was just pure profit. I guess that was maybe a sign of early entrepreneurship. But for me, my personal pivotal point was when I was after college. I didn't get the consulting job that I wanted. And
You're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. And my only option was to become COO of a startup in Sweden that's now super successful. And that you know made me fall in love with technology and the space between operations and technology. It was within last mile logistics. So that was the personal pivotal point to where like, okay, I'm never doing anything else again.
I interviewed someone yesterday from Israel, and we were just talking about how many unicorns have just popped up in the last 2 years. I've been in the venture world for 20 plus years in Europe, and Sweden or Scandinavia in general has also been a pretty, you know, lucrative area for startups, and there's been a lot of unicorns, even going back to, you know, Spotify and Spotify as well. What's in the water, or what differentiates you know, Sweden from other countries? Why are there so many success stories?
No, it's super interesting, and the what's interesting with Sweden compared to then maybe US, that is the most successful space, is that we're more socialist than US, right? And we had this socialist initiative during the 90s, which made basically every home own a personal computer. So we made it very affordable for everyone to have personal computers at home. And we've also subsidized internet for everyone in Sweden. So I think that maybe was a lucky trigger accelerator from the government in the right time that enabled some early successes on technology side in Sweden to take place. And then it's just a regular network effect, right? If you have a Spotify or you have a Skype or something, and then you create a few new angel investors and a few new experienced employees, and they're going to go into new companies, and all of a sudden you have an accelerating effect of that. So I think that's what's been taking place in Stockholm.
As the last question, let's pull out our crystal ball and say, in 10 to 20 years, we'll have a bunch of 15-minute cities. What are 2 or 3 other things that you see kind of, if you're being as visionary as possible, 20 years out? What else is going to change?
20 years out, I think, I'm personally interested in the whole decentralization of like countries and governments and seeing what's possible if you are not tied to a geography to belong to the social net of a government. So that maybe 20 years is too early, but say 30 years, you might have, Limassol has one kind of a government that you can subscribe to and people can come here, and then in Nicosia there's another, and it's distributed more across the globe to allow for more freedom of mobility in that essence. I think the world right now is tied to borders a lot in a way that's really old school, weird, and you're not allowed to go wherever you want. But I think there are opportunities to allow for people to find their own home in a better way.
So 15-minute system, 15-minute cities, lack of government or lack of borders based upon governments. Anything else that you kind of are thinking about?
No, I mean, if both of those,
even if it's a pitch for VOI, but I mean, like,
it's a beautiful future. Yeah. How about you?
Well, I think medical is a huge area. So if to be asked that question, I think a lot of people underestimate what we can do with medicine and what's going to happen in terms of kind of changes society-wise if you're increasing lifespan, health. I mean, I'm not even personally interested about increasing the length of life if it's not quality of life. And I think we're kind of short-term on the quality of life spectrum, ultimately on the length of life spectrum, in connection with so many other things that are happening, right? I think, cities changing, remote work playing a role. I think the lifestyle that people lead, also more and more entrepreneurial quasi approaches to things. I don't think the whole concept of working in factory-like offices is going to exist in 20 years. Who knows what's going to happen on the back of crypto? That's why I love asking the question, because you hear so many different takes on it, but you kind of start hearing over and over similar quasi pieces of the puzzle. But I think 20 years is so hard to predict. That's why you have to be extremely visionary.
I would love it's 1 year now that I have this robo vacuumer at home. And, there was a before and there's an after. And just the prospect of more automation of those things that nobody wants to do, right? Nobody wants to clean at home, and nobody wants to do the dishes and the washing. Like, how can we bring more of that home so that by the time I go, when I'm old, I can only enjoy the things that I want to enjoy and not do any of the labor needed to just maintain health or quality of life, right? So
I think you're on a good path with VOI, so that'll enable a lot of nice devices for your house.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope everyone enjoyed the questions.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, man.